When Rudolf Steiner spoke of the hidden gospel of the human soul, he was not referring to a text lost to the sands of time, nor to a scripture kept in some forgotten monastery in the mountains of Tibet. He pointed to something infinitely closer and simultaneously more inaccessible, the narrative itself inscribed in the intimate structure of each human being, a story that unfolds silently in the deepest strata of consciousness, a sacred story that remains veiled even to those who carry it. This has been hidden from you because the most extraordinary revelation rests not in ancient books, but in the spiritual architecture of your own being, awaiting the moment when you develop the perceptive organs necessary to read it. The tragedy of modern existence consists precisely in this, walking through life, carrying a living gospel without ever suspecting its presence, like someone who carries a priceless manuscript in his pocket but never unfolds it for reading. Steiner devoted decades of spiritual investigation to deciphering this inner scripture, mapping the successive layers of meaning that accumulate in the soul through cycles of incarnation, and what he discovered radically transformed the understanding of what it means to be human. Each soul contains within itself a complete history of cosmic evolution, a memory that transcends linear time and penetrates the eras when humanity had not yet assumed its current physical form, when human consciousness was dispersed in states completely different from those we know today. To understand this inner gospel, Steiner insisted that we first need to abandon the illusion that we are fixed and definitive entities. Ordinary consciousness operates under the assumption that we are born, live, and die as isolated units, and that our biography is limited to the interval between the cradle and the grave. But this perception represents only the shallowest surface of human reality. Beneath it, or rather through it, stretches a continuity that spans multiple existences, a biographical plot that connects seemingly separate lives into a single coherent narrative. The hidden gospel begins to reveal itself when we realize that every present moment contains echoes of ancient experiences, that every current encounter resonates with past encounters, that every decision we make now is rooted in choices made centuries or millennia ago. Steiner described how certain souls carry within themselves the mark of having lived in vanished civilizations, how their inexplicable talents, their apparently unfounded fears, their spontaneous attractions and repulsions are all chapters of a much longer story that the brain's memory can access. This was hidden from you because modern materialistic education has trained us to systematically ignore everything that cannot be verified by physical senses or measured by material instruments, thus creating a kind of cultural amnesia that separates us from our own spiritual past. There is a type of understanding that doesn't come from outside. It simply awakens when you start to look with different eyes. And the most curious thing is that when this happens, you realize that many answers were already around you all along. But not everyone gets to that point, because you need to go beyond the superficial to see what really matters. If that feeling of almost understanding everything has passed you by now, don't miss it. Continue along this path via the description link or the pinned comment. The human soul, according to Steiner, contains 3 distinct regions that correspond to 3 different levels of experience and consciousness. The sensitive soul, which is the outermost layer, registers impressions from the physical world and reacts to them with pleasure or pain, attraction or repulsion. It is in this region that we experience the immediate sensations, the primary impulses, the desires that connect us to the material world. The rational or affective soul, located at a deeper level, is where we process these sensory impressions, where we reflect on our experiences, where we begin to establish cause and effect relationships, where we develop more refined sympathies and antipathies. And finally, the conscious soul, which represents the innermost core of human individuality, is where that spark of self-awareness resides that allows us to say I and recognize ourselves as separate autonomous entities. Each of these regions of the soul carries its own history, its own set of memories and patterns, its own lessons and challenges. The hidden gospel is written simultaneously on all these layers, but in different languages, and deciphering its full content requires that we develop the ability to read on multiple levels at the same time. Steiner observed that most people remain conscious only of the sensitive soul, responding mechanically to stimuli S without ever penetrating the depths where true spiritual transformations take place. This was hidden from you because accessing the deepest layers of the soul requires a type of courage that goes beyond physical heroism, the courage to face truths about ourselves that may completely contradict the comfortable self-image we have built over the years. But the gospel of the soul is not limited to these 3 regions. Steiner revealed that beyond the conscious soul, there is something even more essential, the spiritual core that he called the higher self or spirit. This self is not the product of biological evolution, nor the result of psychological processes. It is an entity that comes from higher cosmic regions and that repeatedly incarnates itself in matter to carry out a process of development that has universal meaning and purpose. The hidden gospel precisely narrates this journey of the spirit through successive incarnations, describing how each earthly life represents a specific chapter in a spiritual education that spans the ages. Steiner explained that the higher self chooses its incarnations based on the lessons it needs to learn and the karmic debts it needs to resolve. There are no random victims of luck or fate. Each life circumstance, no matter how painful or unfair it may seem, was selected by the spirit itself as the necessary ground for its growth. This revelation often shocks those who encounter it for the first time, especially when applied to situations of extreme suffering. How could someone have chosen to be born in poverty, or with a disability, or in the midst of war? Steiner responded that what seems cruel or absurd from the perspective of the earthly personality makes perfect sense when seen from the perspective of the eternal spirit, which values the development of consciousness above any temporary comfort. This has been hidden from you, because accepting this full responsibility for our own condition eliminates all the convenient excuses, all the scapegoats, all the victimization that allows us to avoid the inner work that really matters. The hidden gospel also reveals something surprising about the nature of spiritual knowledge. Steiner insisted that we do not learn spiritual truths in the same way that we learn scientific facts or technical skills. Spiritual knowledge does not enter the soul from the outside in, like new information that we acquire. On the contrary, it emerges from the inside out, as recognition of what we already knew but had forgotten. This is the essence of the Platonic concept of reminiscence, which Steiner expanded and deepened through his clairvoyant investigation. Each soul carries within itself the totality of cosmic knowledge, because each soul is a spark of divine consciousness that permeates the entire universe. The problem is not the absence of knowledge, but the presence of obstacles that block our access to it. These obstacles include material attachments, intellectual prejudices, emotional fears, and ego illusions. Spiritual work is primarily about removing these blockages one by one, allowing the light of inner knowledge to shine through the layers of darkness we have accumulated. Steiner describes specific meditation and concentration exercises designed to tune the perceptual organs of the soul, making it capable of reading its own inner gospel. These exercises are not mere psychological self-help techniques. They are rigorous practices that gradually transform the structure of consciousness, opening channels of perception that remained dormant. This was hidden from you, because modern culture values the acquisition of external information to the detriment of the development of inner perception, creating individuals full of data but empty of real wisdom. One of the most profound revelations of the hidden gospel concerns the relationship between thought and reality. Steiner demonstrated that human thought is not merely a cerebral epiphenomenon, a secretion of gray matter with no consequences beyond the skull. Thought is a real creative force that shapes both the soul of the thinker and the fabric of the world around him. Every thought we hold, every concept we embrace, every idea we nurture contributes to the configuration of our future reality. This is not simple positive psychology or vulgarized law of attraction. It is a profound spiritual truth that Steiner observed through supersensible vision. Thoughts are seeds planted in the soil of the soul, and like all seeds, they germinate and produce fruit according to their nature. Thoughts of love, compassion, and truth create future conditions of harmony and growth. Thoughts of hate, envy, and lies generate future situations of conflict and stagnation. The hidden gospel warns us that we are fully responsible for our mental ecology, that each moment of reflection is simultaneously a moment of karmic creation. Steiner warned that modern humanity faces unprecedented spiritual danger precisely because it has developed tremendous powers of abstract thought without developing the moral wisdom necessary to use them constructively. This has been hidden from you because recognizing the creative power of thought means accepting that we are co-creators of our reality, active partners in the unfolding of the cosmos, and not passive recipients of external circumstances. The gospel of the human soul also contains specific chapters on the meaning and purpose of pain and suffering. Steiner completely rejected the idea that suffering is divine punishment or evidence of an indifferent universe. Instead, he revealed that suffering is an essential pedagogical tool, perhaps the most potent one available for spiritual education. Consciousness cannot evolve without resistance, just as muscles cannot strengthen without exercise that creates tension. Every difficulty we face, every obstacle we overcome, every loss we absorb contributes to the expansion and refinement of consciousness. But there's a crucial distinction that Steiner made between suffering consciously accepted as a tool for transformation and suffering experienced passively as an incomprehensible burden. When we suffer without understanding the spiritual purpose of the experience, When we revolt against our circumstances and blame external forces, the suffering becomes sterile, producing only bitterness and hardening. But when we can recognize in suffering the hand of our own higher self leading us through necessary lessons, when we can say yes to pain because we trust in the wisdom of the evolutionary process, then suffering becomes fuel for qualitative leaps in the development of the soul. Steiner observed that the most luminous and powerful souls he met were invariably those who had gone through tremendous trials and had consciously metabolized them into wisdom and compassion. This has been hidden from you because our pain avoidance culture has taught us to see suffering only as a problem to be eliminated, never as an opportunity to be embraced. And so we have lost access to one of the most powerful levers of spiritual transformation available. Steiner also revealed that the hidden gospel contains prophecies about the future development of humanity. These prophecies are not fixed and inevitable predictions, but descriptions of potentialities that may or may not come true depending on the choices we make collectively. He described how humanity is entering a new evolutionary phase, where spiritual capabilities that were previously the privilege of a few initiates will begin to awaken spontaneously in increasing numbers of people. This democratization of spiritual experience will not come without dangers. Individuals who develop supersensible perception without having first developed moral stability and mental clarity can easily fall into illusions or be manipulated by negative spiritual forces. Steiner warned that the coming centuries would see an intensification of the battle between impulses that push humanity toward conscious freedom and impulses that push it toward mechanical slavery. On the one hand, spiritual forces that work to awaken individual conscience and promote moral autonomy. On the other, forces that seek to completely materialize human consciousness, reducing it to predictable and controllable algorithms. The hidden gospel calls us to consciously choose which side of this battle we want to be on. We cannot remain neutral or indifferent. Neutrality in this context amounts to complicity with the forces of mechanization. Every moment we choose to think for ourselves instead of accepting ready-made opinions, every time we act on an inner moral impulse instead of following external rules, every moment we connect with the spiritual dimension of reality instead of getting lost in materialism, we are voting with our actions for the future that humanity will have. This was hidden from you because seeing this spiritual battle clearly requires recognizing that nothing is neutral, that every trivial, everyday choice has cosmic ramifications, that there is no luxury of living inconsequentially. One of the most enigmatic sections of the hidden gospel deals with the relationship between the individual human soul and the greater soul of humanity as a whole. Steiner explained that we are not isolated spiritual atoms, but cells in a larger organism that he called humanity with a capital H. Each of us contributes to the collective consciousness of the species, and we simultaneously benefit from developments made by others. When an individual reaches a new level of consciousness, he facilitates the path for others to reach the same level tomorrow later. This explains why certain spiritual discoveries seem to emerge simultaneously in different parts of the world. Not because there is mere coincidence, but because the collective human consciousness is maturing to access that level of understanding. Steiner described how the great initiates and spiritual masters of history functioned as pioneers who blazed trails in consciousness that others could then more easily follow. Christ, from this perspective, was not simply a moral teacher, but a cosmic being who effected a fundamental transformation in the structure of possible human consciousness, making accessible to all what was previously available only to initiates. The hidden gospel tells us that each of us participates in this redemptive work, not only passively receiving its benefits, but actively contributing to its continuation. Each time we transform a selfish impulse into selfless action, each time we choose truth over expediency, each time we love where it would be easier to hate, we are expanding the capacity of total human consciousness. This has been hidden from you, because realizing this fundamental interconnection dissolves the illusion of separation that keeps most people trapped in self-imposed spiritual isolation. Steiner also approached the question of evil in a way that contradicts both conventional religious explanations and materialist rationalizations. Evil, according to the hidden gospel, is not simply the absence of good, nor is it an external force that attacks us from outside. Evil is a necessary element in the spiritual economy of the universe, fulfilling specific functions in the evolutionary process. There are real negative spiritual forces, which Steiner accurately identified and named, Ahrimanic entities that work to materialize and mechanize human consciousness, and Luciferic entities that attempt to divert humanity into states of spiritual fantasy and illusion. These forces are not psychological metaphors. They are real intelligences operating in superphysical dimensions. But here's the crucial paradox. Although these forces are genuinely hostile to free and conscious human development, their opposition is precisely what compels us to develop strength, discernment, and moral autonomy. Without resistance, without temptation, Without the real possibility of failure or deviation, the development of genuine freedom would be impossible. The hidden gospel reveals that the universe is structured in such a way that evil is allowed to exist, not because God is indifferent or powerless, but because the good that emerges from the conscious overcoming of evil is infinitely more valuable than any good that would exist automatically without effort. Steiner insisted that the human task is not to eliminate evil from the universe. That would be impossible and counterproductive, but to learn to recognize it, resist it, and ultimately transform it through conscious moral action. This was hidden from you because admitting the real existence of negative spiritual forces sounds primitive and superstitious to modern minds, trained to reduce everything to material processes or psychological constructions. The gospel of the human soul also contains practical instructions on how to accelerate our own spiritual development. Steiner was not an abstract theorist content to speculate about distant spiritual realities. He offered concrete methods, tested through decades of personal practice and teaching. These methods begin with seemingly simple exercises. Observing a natural object for 5 minutes with full attention, without allowing the mind to wander, review the day in reverse order before bed, objectively observing our actions without judgment or justification. Meditate on abstract concepts such as truth, beauty, or goodness until they stop being mere words and become living experiences. These exercises seem trivial, but their consistent execution over months and years produces profound transformations in the structure of consciousness. Steiner warned against seeking dramatic spiritual experiences or sensational psychic phenomena. True spiritual progress is often quiet, gradual, imperceptible on a day-to-day basis, but unmistakable when we look back through years of disciplined practice. The hidden gospel promises that anyone willing to do the necessary work can develop supersensible perception. There is no hereditary spiritual aristocracy. There are no randomly chosen by capricious divine grace. But the promise comes with a condition. The work must be done with patience, humility, and absolute honesty with oneself. Attempts to force premature results or to manipulate spiritual processes for personal gain invariably end in failure, delusion, or worse. This was hidden from you because the authentic path of spiritual development is much less glamorous than UE, the fantasies of pop spirituality, requiring years of dark and difficult work before any visible results appear. Steiner paid special attention to the role of sleep and dreams in the hidden gospel of the soul. While materialistic science sees sleep as a mere period of physical recovery and consolidation of memories, Steiner revealed that during sleep, consciousness partially separates from the physical body and enters spiritual regions where it encounters beings and forces that have a profound impact on our waking life. Dreams are not just random processing of daytime impressions. They are attempts by the waking consciousness to communicate to the sleeping consciousness something of the experiences it had during the night. Most dreams remain incomprehensible because we have not yet developed the ability to adequately translate supersensible experiences into symbolic language that the waking mind can understand. But through disciplined training, we can gradually learn to remember with increasing clarity what happens during sleep, and eventually to remain conscious while the body sleeps. Steiner described how during deep sleep, our soul bathes in restorative spiritual forces that come from high cosmic regions, and how we wake up each morning slightly changed by these influences. If we are attentive, we can notice inspirations, resolutions, or understandings that appear spontaneously upon waking, gifts that our soul brought from its nocturnal journey. The hidden gospel instructs us to treat the period of transition between waking and sleeping with special reverence, as a threshold between worlds, and to cultivate awareness both in falling asleep and in waking. This has been hidden from you because modern life treats sleep as a necessary inconvenience to be minimized, never as a portal to spiritual dimensions that are as real and important as the physical world. The question of destiny and freedom occupies a central position in the hidden gospel. Steiner had to navigate between two equally inadequate extremes: determinism that denies any real freedom, and absolute free will that ignores all conditioning. His solution was brilliantly dialectical. We are simultaneously completely determined and completely free, depending on the level of consciousness from which we operate. To the extent that we remain identified with our earthly personality, its habits, desires, fears, and inherited patterns, we are puppets dancing on the strings of karma and external forces. But to the extent that we can raise our consciousness to the higher self, to that core of pure individuality that transcends all conditions, we become genuinely free. Freedom is not given. It is achieved through hard work of self-transformation. Every moment of conscious choice, every time we act on genuine moral intuition rather than automatically reacting to impulses or pressures, we are exercising and strengthening our freedom muscle. The hidden gospel reveals that the ultimate purpose of all cosmic evolution is the development of beings capable of conscious freedom, capable of acting out of pure love rather than necessity or compulsion. Steiner described true love as free action par excellence. When we genuinely love, we act not because we are forced by selfish desire or external moral obligation, but because we recognize the intrinsic value of another and freely choose to promote their good. This explains why the Christian commandment to love is not a contradiction. It is not an order to feel specific emotion, but a call to develop the capacity for free action motivated by recognition of the other. This has been hidden from you because genuine freedom is much more difficult and frightening than most people realize, requiring us to take full responsibility for everything we do, without being able to blame genes, upbringing, society, or fate. Another foundational chapter of the Hidden Gospel deals with the nature of time and memory from a perspective that completely defies ordinary assumptions. Steiner explained that time does not flow uniformly from past to future as we imagine. This is just the way the physical brain processes events. In spiritual reality, past, present, and future coexist simultaneously in something he called the Akashic record, a kind of cosmic memory where everything that has ever happened remains eternally preserved and accessible. This is not a poetic metaphor. Steiner insisted that through proper development of supersensible perception, it is possible to literally read events from the distant past, as if they were happening now. Even more surprising, he asserted that certain aspects of the future also already exist in seed form or potentiality and can be perceived by sufficiently refined consciousnesses. This does not mean that the future is fixed and predetermines of. It just means that certain trends and probabilities are already in motion and can be detected. The Hidden Gospel teaches us that each present moment simultaneously contains echoes of all past moments and seeds of all future moments. When we make a choice now, we are not just creating a new future condition. We are also responding to choices made in the past and retrospectively influencing the meaning of those past choices. This nonlinear temporality is difficult for the rational mind to grasp, but Steiner assured that it becomes intuitively obvious once we develop direct perception of the temporal dimension. This was hidden from you because ordinary consciousness is trapped in the instantaneous present, unable to access the temporal depth where past and future interpenetrate and determine each other. Steiner also approached the question of death and what happens after it with specificity and detail that no other modern Western thinker has achieved. The Hidden Gospel reveals that death is not the end of anything, but a transition to a radically different state of consciousness. At the moment of death, when the etheric body separates from the physical body, the entire newly ended life passes before the consciousness of the soul in an instantaneous but comprehensive panorama. Every experience, every thought, every action is seen simultaneously, not in chronological order, but in patterns of meaning and connection. Steiner described how this panorama lasts approximately 3 days, corresponding to the period during which the etheric body still maintains its cohesion before dispersing into the cosmic ether. After this initial review, the soul enters what he called Kamaloka, a state where it experiences its earthly actions from the point of view of those affected by them. If we cause pain to someone, we now experience exactly the pain we caused, not as external punishment, but as a natural consequence of our participation in that situation. This phase can last decades, or even centuries, depending on the intensity of the experiences to be processed. Eventually, the soul frees itself from these earthly connections and ascends to higher spiritual regions, where it encounters elevated beings who help it prepare for the next incarnation. Steiner explained that we choose our future parents, our birth circumstances, our physical body, all based on the lessons we need to learn and the karmic compensations we need to make. The Hidden Gospel assures that there is no death in the sense of annihilation or end. There is only continuous transformation of states of consciousness. This was hidden from you because accepting this reality of continuity of consciousness eliminates the fear of death that paralyzes so many people and simultaneously increases enormously the responsibility we feel for our actions, since nothing can be avoided or forgotten simply by dying. One of the most practical dimensions of the Hidden Gospel concerns human relationships and why we encounter the specific people we do in our lives. Steiner revealed that there are no accidental encounters. Every significant person we come across has had some connection to us in previous lives. Sometimes these connections were positive, based on love, friendship, or spiritual collaboration, and we met again to continue and deepen these bonds. Other times the connections were negative, based on conflict, betrayal, or mutual harm, and we met again to resolve and heal those old wounds. Steiner explained that often the most difficult relationships in our current lives are those that carry the heaviest karma from past lives. The tyrant who persecutes us at work may be someone we seriously harmed centuries ago. The romantic partner who betrays us may be balancing a betrayal we committed against him at another time. The Hidden Gospel does not offer this information to make us feel guilty or victimized, but to give us context and understanding that makes it possible to respond consciously rather than react automatically. When we realize that the difficult person in our life is fulfilling a role that we ourselves created through past actions, it becomes much easier to respond with patience and compassion rather than anger and resentment. Steiner observed that families are often made up of souls who have extensive shared karma working through several lives together, sometimes exchanging roles. The mother in this life may have been the daughter in the previous life, the brother may have been the enemy, the spouse may have been the spiritual master. This recognition completely transforms how we see and respond to relational challenges. This was hidden from you, because admitting this complex karmic tapestry of past relationships requires letting go of the luxury of simply blaming others for our relational problems and accepting our active participation in creating each dynamic, difficult situation we face. Steiner also spoke extensively about the role of art and beauty in the hidden gospel of the soul. He saw true art not as mere entertainment or decoration, but as a bridge between physical and spiritual worlds. When we create or contemplate genuine art, our consciousness is momentarily lifted above everyday pragmatism and touches regions where truth, beauty, and goodness converge in unity. Steiner insisted that beauty is neither subjective nor arbitrary. There are objective laws of harmony that govern both artistic creation and the structure of the cosmos. A truly beautiful work of art is not merely pleasing to the senses, it is a revelation of profound spiritual principles expressed in sensory form. He described how different art forms correspond to different levels of consciousness and serve specific purposes in the development of the soul. Music works directly on the sentient soul, moving emotions and feelings through sound patterns that resonate with cosmic harmonies. Painting and sculpture develop the ability to perceive spiritual forms behind physical appearances. Poetry and literature refine imaginative thinking and sensitivity to nuances of meaning. The Hidden Gospel teaches us that regular exposure to true art is not an optional luxury for those with free time, but a spiritual necessity as vital as physical nourishment. In a culture saturated with industrial entertainment and degraded sensory stimuli, cultivating a genuine relationship with authentic art becomes an act of spiritual resistance. Steiner warned that degenerate art, art that celebrates the ugly, the chaotic, the destructive, is not an innocent expression of individual creativity, but can be a vehicle for negative spiritual forces that work to corrupt and fragment human consciousness. This was hidden from you because modern society has completely lost the notion that art has real spiritual power, treating it merely as a cultural commodity or expression of personal preference with no objective meaning. The Hidden Gospel also contains chapters on the importance of nutrition and the way we treat our physical bodies. Steiner was not an ascetic who preached mortification of the flesh, nor a hedonist who celebrated unlimited sensory gratification. He taught that the physical body is a temple of the spirit, an instrument through which consciousness operates in the material world, and therefore must be treated with respect and appropriate care. But taking care of your body does not mean obsessing over health or physical appearance. It means eating in a way that supports clarity of consciousness and spiritual vitality, not just physical longevity. Steiner made surprisingly specific dietary recommendations, favoring a vegetarian diet or at least a drastic reduction in meat, not primarily for ethical or environmental reasons, but because eating heavy meat excessively materializes consciousness and makes it more difficult to perceive supersensible realities. He explained that different foods have different spiritual qualities, in addition to their physical nutritional content. Grains connect human consciousness with cosmic forces of growth and orderly development. Fruits carry solar forces of light and heat. Vegetables root consciousness in earthly forces of stability. Animal products introduce an element of passion and instinct that can strengthen will but also obscure clear thinking. The Hidden Gospel does not offer rigid dietary rules that everyone must follow blindly, but principles that each individual must adapt to their specific circumstances and spiritual goals. Someone who needs to develop more willpower and physical presence may benefit from a different diet than that appropriate for someone cultivating refined, supersensible awareness. This was hidden from you because we have been trained to see food only as fuel for a bodily machine or a source of sensory pleasure, never as a spiritual substance that directly affects our consciousness and perceptual capabilities. Steiner paid special attention to the education of children as a process of reading and supporting the hidden gospel emerging in each young soul. He saw each child as an eternal spirit entering a new incarnation, bringing specific talents, challenges, and lessons from previous lives. The task of the educator is not to mold the child according to some preconceived ideal or fill his mind with information, but to recognize and nurture the unique capabilities that each soul brings, and to remove obstacles that impede their natural expression. Steiner developed an entire pedagogical system, Waldorf education, based on this spiritual understanding of human development. He described how the child passes through distinct stages corresponding to the gradual unfolding of its constituent bodies. First, the physical body for the first 7 years, then the etheric body from 7 to 14, finally the astral body and ego from 14 to 21. Each stage requires a different pedagogical approach, appropriate to what is developing at that time. Forcing abstract learning prematurely before a child has developed the necessary cognitive abilities causes lasting spiritual harm. Equally damaging is neglecting the development of imagination, creativity, and artistic abilities in favor of purely intellectual training. The Hidden Gospel warns us that modern education, in its obsession with standardized testing and the acquisition of economically useful skills, is producing generations of adults with unilaterally developed intellectual capacities, but with stunted emotional lives and completely dormant spiritual perceptions. Steiner insisted that educating children is one of the most sacred responsibilities we can assume, because we are literally shaping the conditions that will allow or prevent souls from developing their divine potentials. This has been hidden from you because the dominant educational system treats children as human capital to be optimized for economic productivity, not as eternal spiritual beings undergoing a crucial phase of conscientious development. The Gospel also addresses the issue of illness and health in a way that integrates physical, psychological, and spiritual perspectives. Steiner saw illness not as a random malfunction of the body or an attack by external germs, but as an expression of deeper imbalances in the entirety of the human being. Every disease has physical dimensions that can and should be treated with appropriate physical means, but it also has soul and spiritual dimensions that conventional medicine completely ignores. Steiner co-founded an entire medical approach, Anthroposophic medicine, based on this integral understanding of the human being. He explained that disease often represents the body's attempt to correct some imbalance through an apparently destructive but ultimately curative process. Fever burns impurities. Inflammation mobilizes defense forces. Even serious chronic illnesses can serve important spiritual purposes, forcing the soul to confront issues it has been avoiding or working through karma from past actions. This does not mean that we should simply passively accept all illness as divine will and refuse treatment. It means we must treat the illness consciously, asking not just, how do I make this go away, but what is this illness trying to teach me? What imbalance is it signaling? The Hidden Gospel reveals that true healing is not simply the suppression of symptoms, but the restoration of harmony between body, soul, and spirit. Steiner observed that the same medical diagnosis in two different people can have completely different spiritual meanings, and therefore require different healing approaches beyond standard physical treatment. This was hidden from you, because modern medicine reduced illness to a mechanical malfunction to be technically fixed, completely losing the dimension of meaning that transforms illness from a mere affliction into an opportunity for learning and transformation. Finally, the Hidden Gospel culminates in revelations about the final destiny of humanity and the ultimate purpose of existence. Steiner described how cosmic evolution unfolds through immense eras, each with its specific characteristics and objectives. Humanity today is only in the middle of a much longer journey that began in hazy, dreamy states of consciousness and will end in states of free, creative consciousness that we can barely imagine now. Each successive era brings new challenges and opportunities for development. The current era, which Steiner called the earthly period, is characterized by the descent of the spirit into dense matter, the development of abstract conceptual thought, and the achievement of individual self-consciousness. But this descent into materiality is not a tragic fall from which we need to escape. Diving is necessary, which allows the spirit to acquire qualities that it could not develop by remaining in elevated spiritual regions. The ultimate purpose of all evolution is to produce beings that combine divine creative freedom with individual self-consciousness, gained through experience in matter. Steiner prophesied that future ages will see humanity gradually spiritualizing matter, learning to create worlds through direct power of thought and will. But before this glorious future can be achieved, humanity must first go through periods of intense trial where forces of materialism and mechanization will attempt to divert evolution into dead ends. The Hidden Gospel assures us that the final outcome is not in doubt. The divine wisdom that guides cosmic evolution will eventually triumph. But the way through, how far we get and how many individual souls successfully complete the journey, depends entirely on the choices we make now in each present moment. Each of us is simultaneously a spectator and participant in this cosmic drama. We can choose to align our individual will with the cosmic evolutionary will, becoming conscious co-creators of the future, or we can resist and fight against the evolutionary current, creating unnecessary suffering for ourselves and delays for the collective process. But one thing is certain according to the Hidden Gospel: no soul will be abandoned or lost eternally. Even those who deviate or fail in this evolutionary round will have future opportunities in subsequent cycles. Divine compassion is infinite, and cosmic patience has no limits. This was hidden from you because realizing the immensity and greatness of this evolutionary process in which we participate simultaneously humiliates the ego that imagines itself to be the center of the universe and elevates the spirit to the recognition of its divine dignity and destiny, completely transforming the meaning of each moment lived and each choice made. Steiner always emphasized that the hidden gospel is not the exclusive property of any particular religious tradition or esoteric school. Although he developed his spiritual investigation within a Christian context and frequently used Christian terminology, the truths he discovered transcended all confessional boundaries. The same fundamental structure of the human soul exists in all people, regardless of their religious or cultural affiliation. Muslims, Hindus, Buddhists, Jews, atheists, all have a physical body, etheric body, astral body, and spiritual ego. Everyone goes through the same process of incarnation and disincarnation. Everyone is subject to the same karmic laws. Everyone has the same potential for spiritual development. What varies are the cultural languages through which these universal realities are expressed and understood. Steiner saw his work not as founding a new religion or sect, but as restoring scientific spiritual knowledge that had been lost with the advent of modern materialism. He insisted that his claims about spiritual worlds were not matters of blind faith or philosophical speculation, but the results of direct investigation using methods of supersensible perception that anyone could in principle learn to use. This represented an audacious attempt to reconcile science and spirituality, to bring methodological rigor and verifiability to domains that traditionally belonged to religion and mysticism. Steiner believed that modern humanity desperately needed such reconciliation. On the one hand, traditional religion was losing credibility among educated people because it refused to adapt its doctrines in light of modern scientific knowledge. On the other hand, materialistic science was creating spiritual emptiness by systematically denying the reality of everything that cannot be measured and weighed. The scientific spiritual inquiry that Steiner proposed offered a third way, recognizing the validity of scientific methods of rigorous observation and systematic verification, but expanding the domain of science to include phenomena and dimensions that transcend the reach of physical senses and material instruments. The hidden gospel, from this perspective, is not supernatural revelation received passively through faith, but knowledge actively acquired through disciplined training of the cognitive faculties latent in every human being. Steiner freely admitted that not everyone is ready or willing to undertake the hard work necessary to develop direct, supersensible perception. But he insisted that even those who cannot or will not become active spiritual investigators can still benefit greatly from the discoveries of those who have made such investigation, in the same way that we benefit from quantum physics or astronomy without being physicists or astronomers. The crucial difference is that in the spiritual realm, as opposed to the physical realm, everyone has the innate potential to personally verify the claims made if they are willing to do the necessary preparatory work. This has been hidden from you because scientific materialism has managed to convince generations of people that spirituality is a domain of a rational faith incompatible with rigorous thought, when in fact it is perfectly possible to apply cognitive rigor and systematic method to the investigation of supraphysical realities, as long as we first develop the appropriate perceptual organs for such investigation. The final revelation of the hidden gospel is simply this: you are much more than you know, your story is much older than you remember, your destiny is greater than you dare dream, and the path to realizing that destiny is available now, in this moment, if you choose to walk it with courage, patience, and absolute dedication to the truth.